In the almost 2 years of Israel's war on Gaza, its genocide on Gaza, they have killed at least minimum 66,000 Palestinians, almost certainly more, and left more than 160,000 wounded. Numbers, as I say, that most experts agree are a vast underestimate. The 2-year anniversary of this genocide is coming as US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threaten to finish the job in Gaza should Hamas not agree to the White House's proposed peace plan. Not only would the 20-point plan initially put Trump in charge of the redevelopment of Gaza, a clear recipe for disaster, but it also fails to lay out any kind of real path for Palestinian statehood. Oh, but it does say the quiet part out loud, announcing that if Hamas agrees to the plan, then all aid into Gaza will resume immediately. Sounds like it's not that hard for Israel to let aid into Gaza if it wants to. Big surprise. UNICEF Global Spokesperson James Elder has witnessed the genocide firsthand and recently returned to Gaza for his 6th visit since October the 7th, 2023. He joined this show back in June on his 5th visit to the Strip, and he joins me again today for a much-needed and long-awaited update. James, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi there, Mehdi. Nice to connect.
When we spoke a few months back, you mentioned the scarcity of aid and supplies in Gaza, which you saw at the time firsthand. Have things changed over the past few months? Is the situation worse or better since you were last there?
Yeah, I mean, they've changed. We've had an official declaration of a famine, which just speaks to that man-made deprivation. You know, as you rightly allude to, this is not to do with logistics. This is politics. Everything that children need is just a few kilometers away. So, I mean, right now, you've either got people in al-Mawasi who are in what is now the most densely populated city on earth. 85% of people are within 10 meters of open sewerage. Remembering that all these people, Mehdi, they lived in homes, they lived in apartments, or they had holiday houses. They're now in tents, or worse, there's a huge number of people who are on the street, who are in roundabouts, who are on pavement. So there continues to be that deprivation of the most basic level of shelter. I'm just coming out of a hospital where for the first time down here in the south, Mehdi, for the first time I've seen a dozen, 15 babies, newborn babies, premature babies in the hospital corridors, babies who've been in intensive care for 2 weeks, now suddenly find themselves lying in a hospital corridor, such as the calamity on maternal health right now. That's again based on things that should be here, like incubators, like oxygen. I saw 3 babies all sharing, brand new newborns who are all premature, sharing oxygen. I keep speaking to premature babies, Mehdi, because 1 in 3 births this year, from January to June, 1 in 3 of those babies were either premature or underweight or went straight to ICU. So there's nowhere near the level of supplies that the children, that families, that mothers, that doctors, that nurses need. Not even close.
And on social media, you often make it a point to share the stories of those children. I've been watching some of your horrific videos online. I have to say, you mentioned the kids in the hallway. What is the worst thing you've seen so far in this current trip? Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Honestly, almost the first day, Mehdi, I was very conscious of coming back, and I've seen so much here in terms of a sense of spirit. There's no cliche to that. There is a reason that Palestinians here over a ceasefire bounce back, and there's a reason that they've rebuilt Shifa Hospital multiple times, and that's on the back of something substantial. That's on the back of one of the highest literacy rates in the world. That's on the back of engineers. That's on the back of doctors. That's on the back of nurses. That's on the back of all these people who are living in tents, who wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to look for water or to look for wood or to go and get plastic to burn. That's on the back of Palestinians. So I wanted to show that. I went to a hospital to speak to some of those doctors and nurses, and also because I understood there'd be some volunteers there trying to bring a bit of joy to children. Within a period of half an hour, Mehdi, firstly I was outside at al-Aqsa hospital in the middle area, Deir, and it was a room full of children, 4 or 5 children, all who'd been shot by quadcopters. All of these children shot by quadcopters. I went inside, and it's a war zone, obviously. There's just children and adults across the floor. I was looking at a teenage boy who'd been shot at one of those Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, was bleeding out with his mother screaming, where in the world does this happen? Where in the world is this allowed to happen? Finally, he was put on a stretcher, and then another child took his place. Again, this is within 20 minutes. Then I looked at a little girl, Mehdi, and she'd just been dragged from the rubble. Her name was Sham, and she's 5 years old. That smell of a child who's been under rubble, the dust, the absolute terror in their face. But she was okay. Doctors looked at her, no breaks. She hadn't yet been told that her mum and her sister both died in that airstrike.
Oh.
I then went into an ICU. It's a makeshift ICU. ICUs here are like an ICU you'd find in Europe and South Africa and the United States. This one's makeshift. And there was a little girl who I was talking to, the doctor. She had beautiful little bobs in her hair. You could see the care that a parent had, and the doctor was explaining her situation from an airstrike, Mehdi, and she died in front of us. So that half hour was as tough as I've seen here. And having said that, if I may, the head of UNICEF was just at that hospital, and 15 minutes after he left, there was a drone strike in the car park where they'd been. That's a few hours in Gaza.
Wow. So I don't even know how to react to that, what you're witnessing. You're not just witnessing this stuff, you're sharing it with us, you're sharing it online. On Instagram, you recently shared the story of 8-year-old Tala, who is in critical condition and is in need of medical evacuation. In the post, you mentioned that her mother asked you to share her story. What do you believe is the benefit of telling these stories from Gaza? Do you think you're having an impact? Is it getting out there? Is it changing the minds of the people in power? And how often do people in Gaza ask you to share their stories?
Yeah, all the time. Every person in a hospital tends to have this piece of paper promising the medical evacuation, promising hope against hope, that not only gives their child who somehow survived one of these attacks, somehow survived a drone strike near their tents or in a shelter with fourth degree burns, and a child in pain not getting the medication that they need because that's denied. So this parent trying to save their life and diminish their pain with this medical certificate. Now, we've seen increases in that. We've seen promises. We've seen the Italian government's taken almost more than half of in Europe. So that makes a difference, Mehdi. But there's 3,500 girls and boys who need medical evacuation. Now, not all of them are trauma. Some of them have got leukemia. Some of them have got cancer, and they will die without it. So part of it is doing that. But part of it, is absolutely falling on deaf ears. When the world or world leaders, those with influence here, have been able to adjust to this level of brutality that I've seen, that you see every second of every day, or just numerically, a girl or boy killed every hour since the horrors of October 7, every hour, there's something profoundly broken when that's the case. But look, UNICEF's work here, it's not just cash, it's not just trauma, it's not just medication and rebuilding pipelines, it is child rights. It is to try and tell those stories of people who don't have a voice. But sometimes it's very, very difficult given the level of impunity.
A recent UNICEF report revealed that the rate of child malnutrition in Gaza in August was 19%, surpassing the previously held record of 16% in July. That is going up month on month. That is not going up because of a natural disaster, a hurricane, a storm, an earthquake. It's happening because children are being deliberately starved in Gaza, is it not? This is all preventable.
Oh, it's been engineered, absolutely preventable. This is not a land where we're hundreds of kilometres or miles away from the care that children need. Everything they need is a few miles away. People are eating at nice restaurants 20, 30 miles away. So this famine was entirely man-made. And we saw during the ceasefire, when humanitarian aid was allowed to flow, as we see one of the promises in this peace plan, humanitarian aid would be allowed to flow, surely therefore debunking the idea that as we've heard many times from officials, that there's as much aid as you need. That is a different problem there, that the way that this has been reported, and that so-called balancing the story, we continually hear from those voices that have systematically been shown to share things that are not true. But yes, when it comes to nutrition, we started to see that during the ceasefire, Mehdi. We started to see an impact, because that's what humanitarian aid is. You have to go to where people need it. You need to make sure that it's demonstrably making a difference. You're getting more water, you're getting more medicines, you're seeing malnutrition going down. Then when the ferocity of attacks start going again, A, we've lost 2/3 of our nutrition centres in the north, and B, people spread. So those families with malnourished babies, if they're given an evacuation order at 2 in the morning, they flee, and and then we have to try and find them again and get them to that care. In the interim, many of those children die. And when I talk of a girl or boy being killed every hour since October 7, 2023, it doesn't talk of, as the doctors say to me, those under the rubble. It certainly doesn't talk to those children having this horrific collision on their bodies of a lack of nutrition, of disease, of a lack of sanitation. And now, as the doctor said, winter coming, and the viruses seem to be coming here early right now.
It's just ridiculously depressing to hear this. Things are not getting better. A lot of people look at what's going on in Gaza, a lot of people in the West, and they say, where do we donate money to? How do we give support? They're not letting aid in. Is there any point supporting groups like UNICEF? Can you explain to our viewers how UNICEF is attempting to fill the gaps in a place like Gaza and support children in a place like Gaza?
Yeah, UNICEF's lucky, Mehdi, and remembering UNICEF is our very brave Palestinian partners on the ground who we work with, my very brave Palestinian colleagues who don't come and go like me. Let's be very clear, those people who go to work every day, leaving their children at home in a tent. But UNICEF, so our work is not just supply driven. We still get, I was in Gaza City yesterday watching a nutrition distribution. There's something quite magical about seeing the relief on a mother when a child gets that magical nutritional food. So we do that. We are repairing water systems. We do still bring in fuel for desalination plants for trucks. But yes, there's been great deprivations on all those things. Luckily, our mandate's so broad that we also do things like cash assistance. Now, I think that is one of the biggest game changers here, that if people do give funding, going to cash assistance, that's giving money into the hands of people. And as your audience know well, people here know very much how to spend those funds, whether it's on hygiene kits for their teenage daughters, whether it's on nutrition, whether it's on some water that they need to pay for. So we do education, we do a lot of trauma. We are in a place of uncharted territory, as we've spoken about before, Mehdi, that not a single place in the world where in one confined space every girl or boy needs trauma assistance. I've seen those children. I've seen them get that care. I've listened to a little girl explain how she gets taught to try when the bombs come to close her eyes and find a place that she remembers well. She goes to her grandfather's garden in Jabalia and tries to smell sometimes the sage. So there's a lot of work we do, and it's on the back of very, very brave people and partners, but it's also on the back of very brave people around the world, very generous people around the world, rather, because there is no magic source of money for an organisation like UNICEF.
James, on Instagram, you recently posted a video which followed the roughly 18-hour trek that a group of aid workers took from Amman, Jordan, through Israeli checkpoints and security to arrive in Khan Yunis, Gaza. Right now, the global Sumud flotilla is being advised to deliver aid through the Ashkelon Marina. That's what they've been told, as opposed to going to the Gaza Strip directly. They're getting a lot of threats from Israel, the Israeli Foreign Ministry. What difference does it make when aid is received in Gaza directly versus having to go through multiple Israeli checkpoints?
Makes a world of difference, because the checkpoints invariably restrict aid coming in. I mean, for example, so on one hand, you've got, now we're being told that people in the north will be considered suspect if they don't come to the south. Let's be very clear. People in the north, I was with them yesterday. There's not a choice here. The idea that people don't have a choice, the idea that your grandfather is in a wheelchair, you don't have the money to get to the south. You certainly don't have a tent, and you know that if you do get there, you've seen it. You've not only seen how overcrowded it is, but you've also know very clearly that so-called safe zones have been struck dozens of times by air attacks, and shrapnel does horrific things to a tent, as I've just seen again, those children in Nasser Hospital. So getting aid directly is a game changer. This idea that we prevented, not just things like the flotilla would have, the food, the medicines, but talking about incubators, talking about oxygen, we're talking about hygiene kits. The idea that these have been restricted, again, speaks time and time again to the deliberate efforts here that have been made against the people of Gaza. So yes, any way that aid can come into Gaza is hugely beneficial to people who are sadly on their knees.
We had a bunch of countries at the UN, over 150 now, have recognized the state of Palestine as a sovereign nation. The French, the Saudis, the Brits, making a big song and dance about this. I wonder, have you seen any shift in attitudes on the ground? Does it affect anyone in Gaza? Are they aware this is happening? Do they care it's happening? Does it feel like lip service? Is it changing their situation on the ground?
No, I'm very fortunate because, as you say, I've been here quite a few times now, and I've met many families who I keep in touch with, and many families when I'm here I go and see. And again, at the education rate here, I'm sitting with a fourth year English literature student whose English is her second language, and she articulates sentences in my mother tongue far better than I do. So I'm talking to people, engineers, doctors, medical students, and so they're well aware of what's happening around the world, and they're also well aware that these statements don't speak to their reality. They're well aware that the governments that have made these statements have many, many more things in their toolkits that would change things on the ground for them here much more dramatically than that. So, yeah, Palestinians are keenly aware of what's being done in their name, and most clearly what's not being done in their name.
Last question, James, just returning to the humanitarian situation. You recently posted a video on Twitter where you recount your experience hearing, and I quote, the screams from tents, air attacks, bombs, tank fire, kids being burnt in their tents, denied life. You shared that many of those injured children wouldn't be given painkillers or allowed entry to hospital if they even survived. In the past 3 weeks, 3 medical centres operated by the Palestinian Medical Relief Society have been destroyed. You mentioned the drone attack where the UNICEF chief was. How dire is the medical situation in Gaza right now compared to your previous trips?
Yeah, it's much worse. And I didn't think it could get much worse. I mean, honestly, to see children die, to see that last time in June, and not for the first time, not just to see the wounds on children and try and think of that, what shrapnel does to a child's body, what a 4th degree burns, not just see these things, Mehdi, a child who's had an amputation, but to hear them, to hear the screams of those little girls and boys, that's something I hadn't seen before. Remembering when I was here in November 2023, I think I got the clearest sense that there was something deeply wrong here when a bus of 7, 8 children came from Shifa Hospital and had taken 3 days because of checkpoints to get there. And I walked into that bus and there was just a smell of burning flesh and a look of absolute terror on those children. So I feel like we've seen the worst of humanity from the earliest stages. So the idea that it gets worse, what I see in al-Aqsa, not that I've seen in Shifa, which is at the front line of this right now, should shake people to the core. Certainly one would hope now it would shake them to action.
We can only hope. James Elder from UNICEF, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for coming on the show, and do stay safe.
Thanks so much, Mehdi.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.